Hey folks, Valerie here with a stitch tutorial video for you. This one is for leg 3 of the Pennsylvania Road Trip Mystery Shawl, and the skill we are going to be dealing with is short rows, specifically German short rows. I have a swatch here that has some stitch markers in it. I've got stitch markers at either end. They mark our edge stitches. The next pair of stitches, this marks where our beginning and ending motifs are going to be worked. All of our motifs have an 8-stitch gap between them, and then these last 2 stitch markers here, this marks off this large section where we're going to do our full motif. We're going to start by joining our new color of yarn, and I find it easier if I'm going to join a new color. I make a little slip stitch in that piece of yarn and put it on the new needle. I've got that on my right needle and my work on my left, and this is going to start just like all the other rows we do. So we're going to slip that first stitch purlwise, and I'm going to take that yarn that I clipped and move it to the back of the work. And now I'm going to knit 2. Okay, so I just want to note, I've worked 3 stitches, but it looks like I have 4 on because of that slip stitch. When we come back to this edge of the row, we want to make sure we don't work that slip stitch. It's only there to hold the yarn taut. Now we're going to get into the directions for the short rows. We're going to knit 1, 2, 3. I should note that I am using the directions for the plus size short rows. The Mrs. size will be the same concept, but we'll have different stitch counts. I knit my 3 stitches. I made 1, I knit 3, and I've turned my work, and I'm ready to do my first double stitch. So I'm going to slip that stitch that I just knit, okay? And then I'm going to tug on this yarn to pull it so that the legs of the stitch below are pulled up over the top of the needle, okay? And now I'm going to bring my yarn in between the tips of my needles to the front, so now I am ready to purl. And I am going to purl 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to slip the marker and move my yarn to the back, and now I'm ready to knit 1, 2, 3 for our edge stitches. And now that our new yarn is set in there, I'm just going to tug that out. Okay, so that has been the first thing we do for our short row motif. Our second row of short rows, I'm slipping, knit 2, move the marker, make 1 right, all right, now this time I am going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and now I come to the double stitch, okay? It looks a little funny. You can see there are the 2 legs on the back and there are 2 legs on the front. It almost makes an X there at the top of the needle, okay? To knit this, I'm going to knit the 2 legs together. Okay, so that is knitting the double stitch. And then I'm going to knit 2 more stitches after that. And I am ready to turn again. You can't see it too well now, but that is almost invisible. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to make a double stitch again. So here we go. I'm slipping the work, tugging my yarn tight, and then bringing it through the needles, ready to purl. 1, I'm going to purl all the way back to the edge marker. And now I'm going to knit 1, 2, 3. Okay, that was step 2. Step 3, we're going to keep going the same way we have been. Slip, knit 2. We're going to knit to the double stitch, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. Okay, I've come to my double stitch again. Okay, and there's kind of an X. It's always going to look a little funny and feel a little bulky, so that's how you know you're there. I'm going to knit my double stitch and knit 2 more stitches. Okay, and as you can see, we're getting close to that marker that I told you was going to mark the edge of this motif. Time to turn, make the double stitch, slip, tug, move your yarn in between the needles, and now purl back. Okay, we've reached our edge marker, so I'm going to move the marker and knit those last 3 stitches. Okay, now we are going to do the final part of this beginning edge motif. We're not going to turn our work. We are going to keep going on to prepare for the next motif. So I'm knitting my edge stitches. I'm making one right. Okay, now I'm going to knit to the double stitch. Almost there, I can see it and I can feel the bulkiness of it. Okay, so I'm going to knit the double stitch and then I'm going to knit 1. Now I have 8 stitches of rest. When you're doing these rows, it's nice that we only do short rows on this with all the motifs twice. These are really, really long. These 8 stitch gaps here are the perfect opportunity for you to set your work down, go make a snack, go to the bathroom, go take a nap, sleep, wait a day or 2, come back to it again at another time. And now we're going to do the plain motif. So to do the plain motif, I'm going to knit 9. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, so I've knit 9 stitches. There are a whole lot more here before we get to the marker, and that's okay. We'll be picking them up as we go. For now, I'm knitting 9. I'm going to turn my work and make my double stitch. Same way we were making the double stitch on the beginning motif. Okay, so slip, pull the yarn up tight, and now let's bring the working yarn in between the needles and purl. The difference here, we are not going all the way back. We are going to purl 7 stitches. 6, 7. Okay, now we need to make another double stitch, but it's a little different when you're making it from the wrong side. So first, let's go ahead and take our yarn to the back, and now we're going to turn our work so the yarn is miraculously at the front. Okay, so to make our double stitch, we're still going to slip that first stitch, and we're still going to tug, and it pulls the legs of the stitch below up. It just twists them a little bit differently. Your yarn is now already in the back, ready to knit. Okay, so we're going to knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this takes you right to your double stitch that you made on the previous row. We're going to knit the double stitch, and then we're going to knit 2 more. 1, 2. Time to turn around and make our double stitch. Okay, so I'm going to slip that, tug, and I brought my yarn to the front, ready to purl, and we are going to purl 7 times. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let me show you that lovely little double stitch when you're coming from the wrong side and getting ready to go back to the right side. Okay, so I've moved my yarn to the back. Now I've turned my work. Now that means my yarn's in the front. Okay, so I'm going to slip that stitch I just knit. I'm going to tug on the yarn, and you can see it kind of pulls the legs up. And now I'm ready to knit back the other direction, and I'm going to knit 6 stitches, or essentially knit to the double stitch. Here's my double stitch. I'm going to knit that, and then I'm going to knit 2 more. Okay. I'm going to keep doing this, going back and forth, a total of 7 times. And then there's one more row that I will do at the very end. Okay, I am here. I have completed my main row 7 times, like I was telling you. How do I know that I have done that? You can count, you can do tally marks, you can also make use of the fact that you've got double stitches to mark your progress. Here's our first double stitch from the very first row before we started repeating. So there's 1, and then I should have 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 double stitches, showing that I repeated those directions 7 times after doing the initial one. The other way you can know is if you look at the other edge here. Here's a double stitch, and then we've got 1 regular stitch before the marker, and that tells me that I have gone as far as I need to go. And so now I've done my repeats, I've made my double stitch and turned my work, and now to finish this motif off, I'm going to knit 6, and then I'm going to knit the double stitch, and then I'm going to knit 1 and move the marker. Okay, so there's our motif. The double stitches tend to bunch up a little bit. Don't worry about that. When we knit back across the row here, that's going to clean all that up. Okay, I'm going to knit across now to my next stitch marker, and then we'll see how to do the final edge motif. Okay, I'm going to move the marker. Now, to make the final edge motif, we're kind of doing, it's not quite exactly the opposite, but it will appear to be, of what we did for the beginning edge motif. Okay, we're going to knit 8. Which is essentially knitting to the edge marker. Okay. And of course, because this is a right side row, we're going to make 1 and move the edge marker and knit 3. Some things never change, right? All right, so now our short rows for the final edge motif are actually written from the wrong side. So now we are going to do our edge stitches, slip 1, knit 2, and move the marker. So now we're going to purl 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And now you're going to turn your work, bring your yarn in between your needles and turn your work and slip that first stitch. We're making a double stitch here. We're going to slip that first stitch and tug so that the yarn is up at the top, and you're ready to knit back. So we are going to knit to the edge marker, which is 7 stitches. And we're going to make 1 left, move the edge marker, and knit 3. Oops. Okay, so that was the first one. Now we're going to slip 1, knit 2, purl 7. Now we're going to put our yarn to the front, because this is where we're making a double stitch. So we're going to slip, I turn my work, we're going to slip, and now we're going to knit back to the edge marker. Okay, time to make one. And we're knitting our 3 edge stitches. Okay, and we're going to go again. Turning our work. Slip 1 purlwise. Knit 2. Bring our yarn to the front. And now we are going to purl 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, going to move that yarn to the front so that we can turn our work and make our double stitch. Okay, so we're going to slip that stitch and pull the yarn up and knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Make our stitch. 1, 2, 3 for our edge stitches. Okay, so we've gotten all the way to the end. Row 5 is done. Yay! So we've got our beginning motif, a gap, our full motif, a gap, and here's our final motif. To finish this all off on row 6, we're going to work our way back across the row, and every time we come to a double stitch, we're going to purl it, just as we're purling all the other stitches around it. Okay, so we're going to handle our edge stitches. No increases because we're on the wrong side. Slip the marker. 1. And you'll know when you get to a double stitch, you'll feel it. It's just thicker and kind of glumpier. I'm going to take my needle and go into both legs of that without splitting the yarn and purl that. So I'm going to keep purling. You're going to get into a series of these. There are 4 in the edge motifs. And then we've got some clear sailing here in our gap. Oops. And then we slip our marker, remove the marker. And the first part of our full motif doesn't have any double stitches in it, so we can just keep zooming along there. And then as you come along to a double stitch, you just purl it just like you're purling all the rest of your stitches. There was one, it's a regular, here's another double stitch. Okay, and I am to my marker. So now I can zoom on by here through the gap. And as I get to the beginning edge motif, there are not any double stitches that I will have to worry about. So I can just zoom onto the edge marker. So there are a lot of different ways to do short rows. I really like the German short row method because you don't have to fiddle with wrapping stitches and all that fun stuff. And it makes it easier when you're knitting or purling back across the work to just do those double stitches and not have to worry about lifting wraps and that sort of thing. So that's why I chose German short rows for this project. Right. I have completed my edge stitches, so now let's just take a look at what we have. We have a partial motif at the beginning, and we have a gap. Here is a final motif or a full motif. And we have another gap. And here is the final motif. And you are going to do that all the way across the row. I am going to do a separate video that will show you how to do the beaded motif or the open motif. And so if you're interested in either one of those things, the double stitches and that remains the same, but there are a couple little tidbits that I want to share about placing the beads and about doing the open work with the laciness. So look for that other video if you're interested in doing that, but certainly if you want to do all your motifs plain, you can do that as well.